And Brother Eric John Phelps, 24/7 World Radio Podcast with you tonight on this beautiful and yet overcast Friday evening from the bustling metropolis of Newmanstown, Pennsylvania on this October 4th, 2024. And I'm with my special guest that I usually have every Friday evening, Brother George Widger. So welcome to the broadcast, George, and I'm ready to hear any new information you may have.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. As always, it's a pleasure to be on with you, Brother Eric.
Pleasure to be on with you. So what do you have for us this evening, my brother?
Well, my scripture verse is Isaiah 1, verse 18. Isaiah 1, verse 1-8, which says, "Come now, let us reason together with the Lord. Though your sins be as scarlet, they shall become as white as snow. Though they be red like crimson, they shall be as wool." Okay, so the context is God, the Lord, Jehovah, is talking to his people, the Hebrew people. Well, yes, that's the meaning. However, one of the applications has to do with reasoning, talking to people, making an argument. And when I say argue, I don't mean being contentious or obnoxious, presenting facts and evidence. So, oh, I hadn't considered that before. Maybe I should look into that. And in a perfect world, that is how things would be done. People would be able to persuade people to see their point of view. But generally speaking, that's not the case. It's usually through intimidation. When you live in a totalitarian dictatorship, like Maoist China, like Bolshevik Stalinist Russia, like Cambodia in the 1970s, that's more often than not the case. We don't care what your rights are. We don't care what your opinions are or how you see the facts. You're going to do what we tell you to do. Otherwise, you're not going to like the results.
That's right. That's how the Jesuits rule. They're absolutists. The people have no rights. They have all the rights. Their dictators have the rights. And they have the power of life and death. And that's the perfect government the Jesuits love to impose on any people, especially historic white people that were involved in breaking of the Pope's temporal power during the Protestant Reformation.
Well, but then there are softer forms of tyranny. There is technological tyranny, such as social media, YouTube, which is ironic since we're on that platform, YouTube, Facebook, X. If you state a view that they don't agree with or like, well, it gets labeled as misinformation or disinformation or hate speech or whatever. As a matter of fact, Tim Walz, who is the Democrat vice presidential running mate, has said in an interview, he says, yes, the First Amendment does guarantee free speech, but it does not guarantee misinformation. So what exactly qualifies as misinformation?
Yeah. Who decides what's misinformation? So that's the ruling elite, the Jesuits and their agents. They're going to say that this is misinformation when we tell you that, well, Francis Cardinal Spellman oversaw the assassination of John F. Kennedy, which I prove in my book. Well, that's misinformation. Really? I prove it. So it's about their opinion. It's about what they want in place so that the people can never recover themselves from their horrible, terrible, absolutist, tyrannical grasp.
Well, and so in places like America, in the Western world, Canada, Europe, Australia, we, for the most part, have experienced soft tyranny. What I mean, being kicked off of Facebook or YouTube or whatever, that's bad. However, in recent years, it's become harder and harder to disseminate dissenting views. And even if we're wrong, even if you're wrong, shouldn't people look at the evidence and make that, draw their own conclusions?
Yeah, that's called freedom of speech. As long as I'm not advocating the death of anybody, like we need to kill all the white people and things like that, and as long as I'm not advocating any kind of genocide or mass murder, as long as I'm not advocating any sins or crimes, as long as I'm putting forth a particular position based upon research and study that's not the same of the scientists of the day or the politicians of the day, that has no business of being censored.
Well, amen. Well, speaking of sins of, say, we weren't exactly talking about this, but speaking of sins of omission versus sins of commission, I dropped the ball last week. I did not talk about Hurricane Helene, which hit, I guess, in the panhandle of Florida. One of the places where it struck was Taylor County, Florida. And this is something like the third time in just over a year that they've been hit by a hurricane. And I was looking at various sources.
You said this is Taylor County, Florida?
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
So this is up on the panhandle, fairly close to Tallahassee, if I'm not mistaken. Although the bulk of the damage was in places hundreds of miles away, such as Asheville, North Carolina. As a matter of fact, Asheville was basically destroyed. And there have been a number of these episodes in recent years, going back to at least 2018, where cities in North America have been obliterated. Besides the aforementioned Asheville in North Carolina, back in 2018, you had Paradise in California. Last year, you had Lahaina, which is in Maui, Hawaii. Also, last year, you had Jasper in Alberta, in Canada, that was destroyed by fire. And you've had a number of other places. I'm drawing a blank in Oklahoma, in Kentucky, in Tennessee that have been destroyed by tornadoes. Now, granted, maybe these events were organic and these people were just simply the wrong place, the wrong time. However, you have to wonder the frequency at which these events are occurring and where they're occurring.
Well, I think, George, that all of these places, except Lahaina in Hawaii, were historic white areas, and they were also Protestant or Baptist. I don't think it's any large Catholic white town that's destroyed. Maybe, but I'm not aware of it. So this just furthers the Jesuit order's counter-reformation in destroying the white Protestants and white Baptists of these various places that are targeted for extirpation pursuant to the Jesuit oath.
Well, it's funny you just mentioned the term extirpation, which is not a funny word. When you say that, I always think of the Catholic Church. I always think of, which is a nicer way or euphemistic way of basically saying mass murder. And if you look at the places that got affected by this recent hurricane, Helene, you're talking Georgia, northern Florida, north and South Carolina, and Tennessee. Hey, weren't those places all part of the Confederacy?
All part of the Confederacy, and the areas that hit were white. Were primarily white people. Mm-hmm.
Well, I know we talked about this, was it a couple weeks ago, in light of the recent debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. And according to President Trump, there is, this town, Springfield, Ohio, has been overrun by these Haitian invaders. I mean, I don't mean to sound mean, but I can't think of a more.
Oh, that's factual. There's nothing mean about it, George. They're Haitians. They're black Haitians. They were brought here illegally by the president, by the military government. They were never properly brought in as immigrants. And so they're brought here to terrorize the white people of that town that they were brought in to terrorize, 2,000 of them. And because the white people are not allowed to resist this, they're going to have to be victims of the mass crime that these black savages have come in to commit. And remember, if you think that is too strong, Dominican Republic doesn't want any Haitians in their country. And that's why they have a huge fence and barbed wire between Dominican Republic and Haiti. And the people of Dominican Republic are not white. So they don't want those black savage Haitians coming in Dominican Republic. And we white people in this country don't want these black savage Haitians coming in here. If individually they want to immigrate, then that's another matter. But to be brought in here by the thousands and the tens of thousands for the purpose of destroying historic white Protestant culture is a sin and a crime for which the people that have brought them in need to pay with their lives for the charge of high treason. So go ahead, George. And those poor souls that have been brought here need to be rounded up and taken right back to their countries. Or else they're going to be rounded up by the new right and they're going to go to the FEMA death camps. So I don't want to see that. I just rather see them taken back to their countries and leave them there.
Okay, so I looked at this for what it's worth. Springfield, Ohio is in Clark County. And as of 2020, Clark County had a population of about 140,000 people, like 137, 138,000, so just under 140. And approximately 88% of those people there are white, of European descent.
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking a mostly white jurisdiction.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just fine. That's just fine. And that's the way it ought to stay.
Oh, okay. I know I brought this up before, but looking at a different country, like the Irish Republic, for example, back in the year 2000, the Ireland was 96% ethnic Irish. And of that 4%, almost all those people were from some other European country, England, Poland, wherever. However, 20 years later, by the year 2020, it had dropped down to only being 80% ethnic Irish. So they're integrating historically Catholic Irish Republic with these people, the same people who are in Germany and France.
The blacks. They're bringing in the blacks and the Arabs into Ireland to. Well, I don't think the papacy wants to destroy these countries. I think they want to drive the whites to desperation. That's what I've always said, because the white race people can only be pushed so far, and then they go to guns. And they don't care about the government, if they're going to fight them or whatever. And I say that's why the Jesuits have brought them into Ireland and Germany and France, to drive these white people to desperation, to be led by some military dictator of the quasi-new fascism that the Jesuits are bringing to power and is spoken of by Martin Lee in his book, The Beast Reawakens. That's what I think.
Okay, so speaking of current events, I made reference to Tim Walz, who is the current governor of Minnesota, and he's also the Kamala Harris's vice presidential running mate. And I guess he and J.D. Vance, the senator from Ohio, had a debate on Tuesday the 1st, which is the only vice presidential debate. It was in Pennsylvania, Lafayette College, wherever that is. I'm sorry, I should know that. Where that is in your neck of the woods. And as I said, this is the only debate between Walz and Vance. And I can't make this up, but I guess CBS, Columbia Broadcasting System, they decided to host the debate. Last time, ABC, American Broadcasting Corporation, decided to host the debate. And the two moderators are Nora O'Donnell and the debate, as I said, on Tuesday the 1st between J.D. Vance, the senator from Ohio, and Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota. And so the two moderators were Nora O'Donnell, whom we've discussed before. I'll give you her background again, and Margaret Brennan. So Nora O'Donnell is okay. So what ethnicity does that sound to you?
Well, I know she's white Irish Catholic. Okay, so they got two Irish Catholic communists. They're feminists interrogating J.D. Vance. Their questions were not fair to him. They were not attacking the other Tim Walz like they attacked J.D. Vance, and it's just very unfair. But what do you expect for this? What was it? CBS?
Correct.
Mm-hmm. It's the communist broadcasting system, the Catholic communist broadcasting system. So what do you expect for them? To have a couple of feminists?
Sonic LCI.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so
this ganging up on J.D. Vance further created sympathy for him, as was done to Trump. So it's creating sympathy for the Republican candidates, as intended, because remember, communism always builds fascism. Russia helped to build or equip Nazi Germany when it had manufacturing plants for ammo, and also the German officers went and trained in military contexts in communist Russia. So communists always built the fascists.
yes, indeed. So, as I've said before, because I know we've discussed.
George, you got a bunch of sound on the microphone. Sounds like wind and.
Okay. Yes, I'm just changing locations. 1 second. All right. So, all right. The wind has. Okay.
I tell you what, George. Why don't we just stop the broadcast for now, and maybe we can do it tomorrow at another time.
No. I'm okay. No, I'm okay. Everything. There's no need to stop. I just had to change the locations.
Okay, well, Eric? Yeah, I'm here. It's frustrating for the listeners and for me too to have to deal with this. But go ahead if you don't think we're going to have any more problems.
Okay, we won't have any more problems. Okay. So how's the audio?
Sounds fine now.
Okay, so you apologize for that little disturbance. Okay, so Nora O'Donnell got her law degree from Georgetown University, and Margaret Brennan went to Sacred Heart Convent High School in Connecticut.
So they're both Catholics, they're both Roman Catholics, and they both were trained at Roman Catholic schools, one of them being a Jesuit school, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So that entitles them to be these interrogators.
Yes. So just like in the previous debates, David Muir, the debate between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, David Muir was a Roman Catholic.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the black lady, Lindsay Davis, I think, she's in the same sorority that Kamala Harris was in.
Yeah, and has a mutual hatred for white people. It's obvious. Go ahead.
Okay, so I just thought I'd share those factoids with you. So, isn't it okay? And it was a similar situation in the first debate a few months ago with Joe Biden and Donald Trump, that you had the same dynamics. Dana Bash of CNN was one of the moderators, but her husband had gone to Georgetown, and so she was Jewish.
Mm-hmm. Well, she's connected to the Jesuits through her husband. Mm-hmm.
And
so we have Jesuit domination in everything, the interviews, the interviewers. So we can't expect anything objective in these debates.
Yeah.
And they're both going to lie about January 6th, that it was Trump's fault, or that it was an insurrection, when none of them will ever come out and tell you that the Capitol Police let those people in and helped to facilitate it along with the CIA. They're not going to talk about that. Oh, no. But they won't talk about 9/11 being an inside job. They won't talk about that. They're both going to mouth the party line. And so that gives really no one to choose from.
Okay, so in the debate, J.D. Vance came across as being, well, reasonable. He seemed perfectly sane, lucid, cogent, articulate.
Yep.
And I agree with almost everything he had to say.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, I would agree. He was articulate, well-spoken, pleasant, somewhat confrontational, but not too much. He could have been more confrontational. And but whenever I hear this rhetoric about a woman's right to choose, a woman's right to choose, a woman's right to choose, no. How about a man's right to choose who he wants to kill? Do I have a right to kill somebody? Is that my right to choose? Do I have a right to kill my neighbor because he said something bad to me or damaged my property? Do I have a right to kill him? What's the difference? Does she have a right to kill her baby in her womb because he might be a little bit unwanted? Is that a woman's right to choose? Well, I can make a statement that a man has a right to choose to kill who he wants to kill if he thinks it's for his own interests. So what's the difference? And this rhetoric is so disgusting and so sickening that anybody can actually believe this is beyond me. But that's what Walls did. Again, the woman's right to choose. And bringing up about a young girl who was raped by her stepfather and therefore and she wasn't able to get an abortion or something like that. Well, what you do is you arrest the man who raped her and then you execute him. And then the woman has the child and the child goes up for adoption. Why should the child die? Because it's a product of rape. Put him up for adoption. And you execute the rapist, and he's not going to do it again. So that's how it should be handled. And when these laws and when this is going to be carried out, they're not going to be doing this anymore. Yeah. Go ahead, George.
Well, I agree. And of course, this is something we've discussed before. They like cloaking their evil in such soft, euphemistic language, such as reproductive freedom or a woman's right to choose.
LGBT community, there's no such thing as an LGBT community. They never built anything. They never built a town. They never were building anything. So it's just a bunch of perverts wanting some respect. So no, we're not going to tolerate that perversion. If that's what you're going to do, then you need to be preached at and preached to and preached for that it's all sin that you're advocating, and you're not going to be promoted in our culture as long as you're doing that, because I don't want my friends and children poisoned by your evil, wicked mentality and what you do. So you're not going to be part of my culture. Okay. See, this is the hardness that we have to adopt, or these centers are going to take everything over and take from us everything God ever blessed us with. But go ahead, George.
Well, it's just like, if you reframe the language, if you, in addition to using the euphemistic terms, if you appeal to people's emotions and cloak your actual actions, you make wickedness much more palatable, such as, well, it's a choice. Well, it's not a human, it's a fetus. And I know you've discussed this before.
Yeah, an animal has a fetus. It's a baby. It's a tripartite baby in the image of God, not like a cat that's a fetus or a dog that's a fetus. Go ahead.
Well, yes, I concur. And so when you basically manipulate the language, you can manipulate the way that people think. And if you can control the way that people think, you can control the way they behave. And so it's just like, so they spin it on you, like when you object to murder or sexual deviancy, perversion, it makes it sound as if you're the one with the problem, or you're a bigot, or you're or whatever, you're sexist, you're xenophobe, whatever.
And that to me for years, George. It's okay. Water off a duck's back. Just let it go. Who cares?
And so, and then this actually happened in California 5 years ago, back in 2019, before this hits, in that they started putting female hygiene products in men's bathrooms, such as at libraries, i.e. tampons. And it's just like, why? I mean, it's just like, I guess it's to further agitate people and to, annoy people.
Sure, that's exactly right. So they should have been ripped down off the walls and taken right down to the office that put those in there and put them right in their office. And these are yours. They're not ours. And we're not going to have these in our school or our restrooms at all. So we're not putting up with it. You take them right back.
Well, and in terms of, say, Neela's agitation, I guess one of the popular comic book characters is Captain America. I only know this perfectly because I'm not into comic books, even as a child. I mean, I think I bought 2 growing up. And one was because it was set in World War II, and you had a German tank fighting an American tank, and I was, I want that. Not because I was into comic books, I just wanted the cover. So I asked my dad if he could buy that for me. So anyhow, one of the popular characters is Captain America, who in real life is Steve Rogers. Are you familiar with this character, Captain America?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so for over 80 years, almost 85 years, Captain America has been white. His alter ego has been Steve Rogers. But I guess the people who run Disney or DC or whoever is making the movie franchise have decided to say, you know what, he needs to become black.
Well, that's what they're doing with everything. All the commercials are black. You go into the banks, you have all these black posters, people that are blacks in the posters. You find a very small amount, if any, that are white. Right over here in 422, I'm driving down to 422. It's all a white area. But what do? They put in a black man with a bobbed off hair, black woman there, and they're so happy and they're smiling. I don't want to see that. That's for Harlem. That's for a black community. That's not for a white community. And they do the same thing. You drive down the road a little more, and you got this black woman in bed, and she's laying against her pillow. But this is a white area. I don't want to see their posters. They don't want to see my white posters in their areas. But it's forced miscegenation on white people, and they're doing it in everything. All the insurance companies, the stores, and also shoving Spanish down our throats. I don't want to hear Spanish. If I want to go to hear Spanish, I'll go to Mexico. This is English-speaking country. We have to have one language if you're going to have a strong country. So it's all about destroying the whites who speak English by inundating us with black advertisement everywhere. I watched the Super Bowl with my son. What a black celebration that is. Football is a black sport. I don't want to watch it anymore. So it's miscegenated, it's pro-black, it's anti-white, it's black majority. Now we're going to have black quarterbacks and the whole 9 yards because we're all the same. We all have the same abilities. That's all the brainwash they want to do to you. And these young white people that see this believe it. And they have no idea what history truly is. So it's destroying whites, white history, white culture, and it's time the white people said enough is enough. I'm not going to any more of these sports games. I'm not going to any more of this women's basketball where these savage black girls are destroying Caitlin Clark, trying to put her eye out and causing all this damage. So, you know, this assault's being facilitated to drive the whites to desperation. So the whites' first thing ought to do is say, we're not going to the basketball game anymore. Let the blacks go to it. We're not going to the football games anymore. Let the blacks go to it. We're not going to go to any pro-black, anti-white gathering anymore. We're not taking the knee, and we're not putting up to see these players take the knee. In fact, let's just do away with professional sports. We don't need them anyway. It's a preoccupation of 14th Amendment America. You know, it's going to have to come to something like that, where we're not going to make these black, hateful, racist millionaires by going to see their games or watching their movies or their TV. It's got to stop. That is, if white people want to have a country or a people left in 50 years.
Well, amen. Well, you know, to that end, so I just talked about how they decided to swap out the new Captain America, who is now black. So after 80 some odd years of being white. Well, I guess last month was it Loyola Marymount Los Angeles just hired a new dean. Her name is Brietta Clark. And okay, Brietta, that's I'll spell the name. Brietta Clark. She's a black woman. So her consular is she's the first female head and the first non-white head of Loyola Marymount Los Angeles.
Well, I think the Jesuits ought to put blacks all throughout that college. They ought to make them all the professors, all the advisors, all the counselors. Just make it entirely black, Loyola Marymount College, the black Jesuit college, and see how far that gets. So hopefully there'll be some white Roman Catholics who say, we're not sending our children there anymore. And so let it go broke. So Go ahead. But the
Well,
Jesuits are the masters, amalgamators. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, okay. I don't mean to. I know this may sound a bit puerile of me, and so forgive me. I guess it took over a year to come up with a successor or the new dean. So I guess Clark was on the faculty already. So they had a search committee to come up with a new dean. And I guess the head of the search committee was one of the law professors there at Loyola Marymount, Elizabeth Bluestein.
A Jewess. So we'll have the socialist, communist, Jesuit trained Jewess to pick a black woman to be the head of the college. Remember what the Klan warned about? Blacks, what is it? What is it? The blacks and the Jews, and who else was it? The Catholics. The Catholics and the blacks and the Jews. They're going to take over the country and destroy it. And that's what the second Klan had to say. And they were right, because that's what's being done right now. And remember, this is exactly what the writer of the Defense of Virginia and the South, Dabney, wrote about the conquerors forcing the blacks upon us, whites of the South, that would result in amalgamation and the destruction of the whites of the South. He wrote that in his book, and that's what we see happening right now. So the Jesuits want to Africanize, race mix this place so that it is no longer a great nation. The whites have been beaten down, trodden down, destroyed, made to feel ashamed that they're white people, day in and day out, week in and week out for the last, 20, 30 years. And now we see the fruit of this.
Oh, 20 to 30 years. You're talking probably more like 70 plus years.
Maybe 70 years. Okay. Yep. Since the civil rights movement starts, the uncivil rights movement run by the Jesuits, using certain perverts and liars like Martin Luther King.
Okay, so anyhow, when I guess they were having, so this Brandon Clark is the head of the law school at Loyola Marymount. So she's not the head of the university. So I'd imagine, I'm just guessing, that this Clark will just simply be the front. She'll give speeches and go to the meeting, but it'll be probably somebody like Bluestein who'll actually run the law school.
Probably. It'd be a Jew who runs it, because they have the most advanced brains of any race of people, and so the Jesuits will use them to run whatever they want to run.
And they have a huge number of, well, forgive me for saying so, but one of the prominent professors there at Loyola Marymount is Jessica Leviton.
Okay, no, she's another Jewess, right?
Yes. Okay,
so we have these Jewesses and Jews that are left-wing. I don't have anything against the Jews if they're going to advocate right things, like Mark Levin and Shapiro. But these vast majority of Jews in academia are all socialists. They're all communists. They're all anti-white. They're all pro-black. They're all anti-gun ownership. And that creates a bad feeling for Jews in general that will be used to justify their roundups when the final new right dictator under martial law comes to power. These Jews ought to discipline themselves, say, wait a second, you can't be advocating this. It's going to get us killed. Gun confiscation, you out of your mind? Advocating pro-black, anti-white policies, you out of your mind? Advocating the destruction of white people, you out of your mind? This has to be dealt with, or else we're going to get the end result of this horrible martial law that's coming.
Well, and of course, I was thinking that somebody like J.D. Vance would most likely be the face of it and not Donald Trump, because Vance is only about 40 years old.
Yeah, I agree. He could very well become the president once Trump would be removed. And what's he going to do? Well, Vance believes in the doctrines of Thomas Aquinas. He said it was the writings of Aquinas that converted him to Catholicism. Well, I would add that the writings of Aquinas justify or call for the killing of heretics. That's his Summa Theologica. So is Vance going to go along with that, with the writings of Aquinas?
Well, and something I mentioned before, both Vance and Walz have military backgrounds. J.D. Vance was in the Marine Corps. I believe he was an officer, and Wallace was in the Nebraska and later the Minnesota National Guard. He was in for over 20 years. So I bring this up because that almost certainly means they were sheep-dipped. The CIA installed them into their positions. I mean, forgive me for sounding like a conspiracy theorist.
George, George, you don't have to say that anymore. Don't say forgive me for conspiracy theorists. We believe in conspiracy. It's a Jesuit conspiracy, and it's so vast that we really can't comprehend it. So we're just dealing with appendages of it every time we have a broadcast. So no, it is conspiracy. I'm not ashamed of it. This is the way it is. Anybody who believes in coincidence is out of their mind if they know any history whatsoever. So no, don't apologize for that anymore. This is exactly what it is. A Jesuit conspiracy on all these fronts for our destruction. And we need to be bold about talking about it. So go ahead, George.
Well, I'm being somewhat sarcastic when I say that, because just as a quick reminder, I know I spoke about this a few minutes ago. So once again, both the moderators for the vice presidential debate, Nora O'Donnell and Margaret Brennan, were Catholic educated. O'Donnell got her law degree from Georgetown University, and Brennan went to Sacred Heart Convent High School in Connecticut. Now, you just mentioned that J.D. Vance is a convert to Catholicism. He said he thinks largely to the writings of Thomas Aquinas. Now, Tim Walls, he's nominally Protestant. He's part of the ELCA, the Evangelical Lutheran Church of America. Although he did get his master's degree from St. John's University in it's a suburb of the was it Collegeville? It's a suburb of the Twin Cities.
Oh, so, Minneapolis, Minnesota. St. Paul, Minneapolis. Okay.
Correct. So all four people whom you saw the other night.
The Lutheran Church is completely compromised. Their World Council of Churches, their National Council of Churches, and hence they're totally controlled by the Jesuits controlling those organizations. So they'll never say anything offensive about the papacy. They'll never call the Pope the Antichrist. They'll never review the history of what the papacy has done to the Lutherans, which you can read about in some great works like the work on the United Netherlands, where they buried the Lutheran women alive and burnt the Lutheran men alive with the Edict of 1550. So, no, they're not going to review that history. We can all get together and, okay, well, you just keep believing that, and they're going to march you right off to the camps.
Okay, so I'd just like to mention a couple of things that are more of bread and circuses natures. I guess today's the 4th, so I guess was it Sunday the 30th? Pete Rose died. Peter Edward Rose, the great baseball player. Do you remember the big red machine of the 1970s?
Oh, sure.
Okay, so Pete Rose got.
I remember Pete Rose. Pete Rose was a very giving individual. He went and bought Jeeps for all of his friends out of his money, brand new Jeeps. But go ahead.
Okay, so why am I talking about him? Well, he was part of the Jacques de Molay Society.
Well, I was too. I joined it as a young man in high school, and I joined it, never went to any of the meetings, but, I thought it was a joke, but I don't know if it means much. Was he a Freemason, a Scottish Rite Freemason, or what?
Well, that I don't know, but that was like one of his keys to success. I mean, yeah, granted, he was a talented ball player, but being part of the DMLA didn't hurt. It's just like it obviously didn't help. It obviously didn't hurt Walter Cronkite.
Was he DMLA also?
Oh, correct. Same thing with Walt Disney, Fran Tarkenton, the quarterback of the Minnesota Vikings. And
but remember, DMLA is for the young men. When they turn 18, they have the opportunity to become Freemasons. So they kind of graduate to that. So if he didn't graduate to become a Scottish Rite Freemason, then DMLA is named after that horrible, terrible Knights Templar, Jacques de Molay, who was burned at the stake. But I tend to think that if they don't go on to Freemasonry, then they're then their membership and DMLA kind of falls away and they don't think much about it. But I may be wrong.
Okay, well, maybe I'll have to look into that. So one of his teammates, Pete Rose's teammates on the Big Red Machine back in the 1970s was catcher Johnny Bench. And I think I mentioned this before. So Bench, was a catcher who hit a lot of home runs and was also a very good defensive player. Well, Bench sent his son Bobby to Xavier High School in Cincinnati, Ohio. And I guess after Rose's death, I guess Bench was talking on a podcast with Dan Patrick about his recollections of Pete Rose as a player and afterwards. And Dan Patrick, Daniel Patrick Pugh, got his undergrad degree from Dayton University in Ohio, which is a Catholic school. Specifically, is a Morris Brothers school.
Okay, well, he went to a Catholic school, and I'm sure they keep track of all their graduates to place them in places of influence and power.
And so I decided to watch the interview for intelligence purposes to see if I could glean anything of interest. And one of the things that Bench and I guess Patrick were talking about was, Pete Rose, even though he has more hits than anybody else and he has a number of other accolades, he's not in the Hall of Fame because he got kicked out for gambling. And but one of the things they brought up is they said another scandal that has rocked baseball for a long time is the steroid scandal. And Patrick said, well, back during the steroid scandal. Well, all right, he's obviously a concealment artist because they're all doing roids. They're all on drugs. They're all on amphetamines. They're on pain pills. The balls are juiced. The bats are juiced. The umpires are incompetent. They don't call strikes and balls correctly. They don't call safe and out correctly. It's just like the referees in the NFL. They only call penalties on the teams they want to lose, and they don't call penalties on teams they want to win. So all sports are rigged. All sports are all players on drugs. Yeah. And this is not just professional sports. This is semi-professional sports, like the Olympics. All those female athletes, they're on some sort of crazy hormones.
Yeah, it's just time, as far as Christian people, Bible-believing people, let's just do away with the sports. Let's not waste our time with them. We have better things to do. I had a Mennonite lady say to me one time, when a guy that I did work for, he gave me 2 tickets to the baseball game here in Harrisburg. I forget the name of the team. And I didn't want to go, so I offered them to her. And she says, Eric, we Mennonites don't go to any sport games. She said, when we became adults, we put away childish things. And the more I thought about that, the more she was right. It's just childishness, all these games and sports. A total waste of time. And the Puritans in England refused to be involved in any sports on the Lord's Day and generally didn't participate much. So I just look at the sports issue as a complete and total Jesuit preoccupation to keep our eyes away from the things that really matter, like what are your rights? How is your economy? Are you able to make a living to support your wife and children? Those are the important things. And if someone's going to undercut our currency and give us paper instead of gold, whoever does that needs to be put to death. So we always need to be on guard, watching under prayer over those essential things that make our lives workable. And sports take our attention away from that.
And of course, in addition to being distractions, they're oftentimes part of the problems. They're part of the agitation, like Black Lives Matter, or kneeling or not kneeling for the national anthem or whatever. But otherwise, they've been insidious in other ways. So for example, I remember our local radio sports station that carried the baseball games for the Giants, KMUR 680. They're saying, they're doing the propaganda ads, mask up, California. So remember, when you go into a business, be sure to cover your face. Mm-hmm. Then the following following year, 2021, they changed it to Backs Up California. So to protect yourself and keep up to date on your boosters. Well, first, this is a sports station. They're supposed to be talking about baseball or other things, not about public health or so-called public health. So they're going to tell you, well, be sure to eat your fruit and vegetables. Be sure to brush your teeth. Be sure to go to bed at 10 o'clock. Mm-hmm. So where is their, why should a sports stadium be giving health advice to anybody?
That's right.
And, well, okay, so I just mentioned the death of Pete Rose. So, that's the job of people like Dan Patrick, is to make sure people are preoccupied with bread and circuses, things that don't matter. Basically everything you've just talked about over the last few minutes.
Yep.
Something I want to mention is over the weekend, I just saw the film Reagan, which was a biopic about Ronald Reagan, and you said you've seen it.
Yep, my wife and I watched it one night. Mm-hmm.
Oh, did you stream it?
No, it's on the TV. You can get it on. You can watch the movie. I forget what it's called. Some network. My son got, so we watched it. And it was a great big whitewash. It was a whitewash of Ronald Reagan. That's what it was.
Yes, indeed. Of course, I'm sure his only regret was he wasn't able to be it himself, because that was his greatest role, playing the president of the United States.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And his second greatest role was playing governor of California.
Yeah. There's a book on him called The Counterfeit Candidate. The John Birch Society used to put it out. And it showed how he was for everything that the average red-blooded, hard-working white American was against. Gun control and a host of other things. So he was an absolute fake, evil, wicked man, totally in the hands of the Jesuit order, and a precursor to Donald Trump in building the new right, because he's the one that said, make America great again. It didn't have that in that movie, by the way. So.
Well, actually, they made a couple of glaring omissions in that film, such as his wife, Nancy, was very much into astrology. As a matter of fact, she had an astrologer come to the White House on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, she was a witch. She enjoyed witchcraft and looking to the host of heaven with astrology, and Jane, like that evil, what was her name, Jane Dixon. So it's all a design to get you away from the Word of God and a simple living and biblical reading. So. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Hi.
Okay.
Okay. So.
Is it time, George? That is the time that we ended the broadcast. I think you have someone wanting to see you.
Oh,
there.
No, I just, my grandniece just wanted to ask me something. But anyhow, so just, I know we've talked about Ronald Reagan before, but just as a quick reminder, among other things, he was a 33rd degree Scottish Rite Freemason.
Really? Reagan was a 33rd degree Scottish Rite Freemason?
Yes. He was baptized Roman Catholic because his father, Jack, was a devout Irish Roman Catholic. His father, Jack, and his brother, Neil, were both Knights of Columbus. And Reagan, as we've discussed before, was a Knight of St. John of Jerusalem. As a matter of fact, he was knighted a week before he actually left office in 1989.
Yes, indeed. The video's up. Anybody can watch that.
And once during his term, he actually, I guess, gave a video message to the Knights of Columbus at their annual meeting. So he was very much in the lap of Rome. Yeah. He officially reestablished diplomatic relations with the Catholic Church in 1984.
Vatican. Yeah. Don't say Catholic Church. Say with the sovereign state of Vatican City, because that's a nation. And so the listeners need to know he established diplomatic relations with the nation of the sovereign state of Vatican City, which has a king that cannot be sued. He's a sovereign, and he's called the Pope. So that's right. He committed a high treason when he did that.
Okay, I beg your pardon. Yes, thank you for the correction. So he did that on January the 10th, 1984. So exactly 33 years later, January the 10th, 2017, Anthony Stephen Fauci spoke at Georgetown University. This is 10 days before Donald Trump took office. And Fauci said that sometime during the Trump administration, there would be a surprise outbreak. It's just like, so the surprise outbreak was as much of the attack on Pearl Harbor. But anyhow, so exactly 33 years later, Anthony Fauci spoke at Georgetown and said there would be this surprise outbreak under the Trump administration.
How did he know that? Is he a prophet?
Well, I guess.
Yeah, how did he know that? Because he's part of it. He was making it happen. So this proves conspiracy right then and there. It wasn't just a lucky guess. Go ahead, George.
Well, yes. So, but as I said, it was 33 years to the date exactly. So you're talking about the 10th of January, 1984, January the 10th, 2017. I just realized that year is also just a coincidence. The time elapsed. So, I mean, there's all sorts of things I can talk about Reagan, such as he sent his son Michael to Loyola High School in Los Angeles. His ex-wife, his first wife, Jane Wyman, who grew up Episcopalian, switched over to the Catholic Church after she divorced Ron, and she actually became a Dominican nun.
Okay, I see.
Let's see now. Patty Davis, their daughter, one of them, also converted to the Catholic Church. So almost all the major members of Reagan's cabinet when he was president were Catholics, like William Clark, for example. Haig, Alexander Haig. And it was also, Haig was a Knight of Malta. William Casey was also a Knight of Malta. He, I know that you and Stephen Drake talked about Casey before. So almost all the people, his Secretary of State, his Secretary of Defense, were Catholics, or they're high-level Freemasons.
Yeah.
But they failed to cover any of these facts in this film.
Oh, of course. Of course not. They're not going to deal with relevant facts that prove conspiracy or prove that Reagan was the shyster that he was and the evil man. But no, they're not going to bring that out. They have to make a hero out of him. I don't know. And, maybe I ought to get Rachel Maddow on there. She can make a movie on him.
Well, exactly. Well, of course, the producer of the film was Howard Hausner, Hausner, and he's a devout Roman Catholic. That says so on his webpage. And so the film was based on Paul Kingor's 2017 book, A Pope and a President. And Kingor is a devout Roman Catholic, and he went to was it Franciscan University in Ohio, Steubenville, Ohio. So almost all the people involved with the film were devout Catholics.
I imagine, yeah.
And so do you remember the premise of the film was, I guess you have this old KGB agent played by John Voight who's mentoring a young, well, they don't, what are they called the KGB these days? This young Russian spy, and it was set in the 21st century. And they said, you know what, it's too bad, we lost the Cold War. I yearn for the good old days back when we used to terrorize the West. And so this elderly spy, played by John Voight, saying, well, we're basically taken down by one man, Ronald Reagan, the great crusader.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's nonsense. It's so ridiculous. One man takes down the Soviet Union. What a joke. I mean, to think that that doofus would have that kind of power is the Jesuits wouldn't permit that. It's the USSR is their country. This country is their country. And therefore, they're going to control the politics and the parties through the intelligence communities they control. There's no way that any individual can rise and do this. So it's ridiculous.
Well, and of course, they said it wasn't just Reagan. They had the trifecta. They had the Iron Lady, Maggie Thatcher, assuming she's a woman. And you had Pope John Paul II, the so-called Saint John Paul the Great. So these three amigos basically brought down the Soviet Union.
Yeah, it's ridiculous to think that the Pope would bring down the Soviet Union. It's all open but false policy because he created it. Mm-hmm. Just a change of names. The essence is the same. But yeah, so the truth is just, Jack Nicholson was right. You can't handle the truth. And that's how these American people are. They just can't handle it. They want the old dialectic of U.S. versus Russia. And we're going to send our children in the military to fight, the Russian war. It's just all an act. It's all lies. And unfortunately, we're going to pay for it as a people because we believe those lies.
Okay, so could I just back up? Now, I realize you're a little bit older than I am. So when Ronald Reagan became president in 1981, I was 11, almost 12 years old. And I wasn't really, like most children at that age, I wasn't really into politics, but I knew who Ronald Reagan was because of my dad. And my dad wasn't a big fan of his, but that's besides the point. And he said, wow, I'm surprised that actor made it to president. I hope he does a good job. But anyhow, so, we talked about my dad's views on the whole Cold War. Basically, he said it was a hoax without saying as much. But I thought it was real growing up because I didn't know any better. And one of the things you mentioned to me in a private conversation is Reagan was the first person to use the expression, "Make America Great Again," or MAGA. And something I mentioned that in the Church of Satan, that is the fifth and highest degree for that fake church. It's not a real congregation. And you said you are vaguely familiar with the Church of Satan.
All right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was familiar with it because I grew up near it. It's in San Francisco there, and I grew up in Richmond area that was not very far from San Francisco. So we all us guys knew about Anton LaVey and the Church of Satan.
Oh, do you mean Howard Levy?
Howard Levy? Who's that?
That's his real name.
Or yeah, we didn't know he was a Jew. I knew he'd been raised Roman Catholic.
Well, he's from Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. So he was, I guess, Ukrainian Jewish or something like that, and he was born in Chicago, but grew up in Marin County. Does anything good come from Marin County? Well, okay, that's another conversation altogether.
Hey, Marin County has sailboats. How about that? Sailboats are nice, but Sausalito is full of homosexuals. But Sausalito was a beautiful little place, and had sailboats there. So I guess that's the high point of is it Marin County, Sausalito, Marin County?
Okay, so basically, to survive in Marin County, you either had to be a spook or you had to have money.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, so I'm not sure how what his family did growing up. So the CIA decided to create this bogus church, the Church of Satan, and they said, "Hey, Howard, we want you to be in charge of this. Oh, and we need to change your name and shave your head and have you grow this, silly goatee." And so, okay, so it was just another acting gig for him.
Sure, and the Jesuits probably wrote the Bible of Satan, the Satanic Bible. They probably wrote that for him.
Yeah,
I'm sure he did.
Yeah. Well, and of course, as I said, the fifth and highest degree in the Church of Satan is MAGA, and I realized that there's probably an inside joke, and I probably
say that again, George. Say that again. The highest degree in the Church of Satan is MAGA.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. Like Make America Great Again?
Correct.
Okay, George. Okay, go ahead.
So, anyhow, I guess during the 1960s, the CIA was busy creating all these churches and all these religious movements, such as, we talked about Calvary Chapel. Okay, so I guess the powers that be said, you know what, we want to create a mainstream, normal-sounding church with traditional doctrines. Like, people will confuse them for Baptists. We want to create Calvary Chapel, so they use Paul Kane for that, and they use Chuck Smith as a frontman for Calvary Chapel back in the 60s. And they said, okay, well,
are you saying that Chuck Smith was an asset of the CIA?
Well, am I under oath?
Well, I'm just asking if you are. Do you have a source for that? Because, I never did like Calvary Chapel. It's not local church based. It's a business. It's just all sorts of unbiblical things involved with that. It's 501c3. But I'm just wondering, nothing would surprise me anymore. I mean, but go ahead. But again,
Okay,
Calvary Chapel, they're not denouncing the papacy. Are they denouncing the Pope? They tell them the power of the secret societies running this country for the Jesuits. Are they saying anything like that?
Not so much.
Not at all.
Okay, and well, you see, what is the purpose of creating a group like Calvary Chapel? Well, they were instrumental in creating all sorts of your aberrant religious groups like Synanon. Chuck Dietrich was a devout Roman Catholic, and that was actually in Marin County. I'm sorry. Well, there's a situation that has just arisen, and I was going to. I'm sorry. We're going to. We're
going to have to close this, Jordan or George. So, why don't you give your contact information, and we're going to go ahead and close out the broadcast today. Go ahead.
Okay, if people have any questions, comments, concerns, or critique, they can always email me at George Widger, WIDGER, 1969@gmail.com, WIDGER, 1969@gmail.com. And if people have any questions, comments, concerns, or critiques, there's some other points I wanted to cover, but hopefully I can get to them next week.
Okay, sounds good, George. Brother Eric John Phelps, thank you for tuning in today. I have a book, Vatican Assassins, One in the House of My Friends. Please go to my website, vaticanassassins.org, pick up a copy of the ebook.
That's in it?
I agree, honey. That's right. And you guys go to 24/7 World Radio, and you can pick up my previous broadcasts. Pray for us 2 minutes a day. Send your gifts to rbpbdonate@comcast.net, rbpbdonate@comcast.net, or Eric John Phelps Cash App, or to RBT at P.O. Box 306, Newmanstown, Pennsylvania, 17073. So appreciate you listening in, appreciate your gifts, appreciate your prayers. Until the next time, with Brother George, Maranatha.
You do, brother.